Hello, hello, good morning, buenos días. Estamos en Conciencia Planetaria. This program today is going to be in English. Este programa hoy va a estar en inglés y mañana en 24 horas vas a poder escucharlo con subtítulos en español y todas las otras idiomas en YouTube. So today we gather at a powerful turning point of the year, the solstice. Well, the solstice was Sunday, but we're still in the window and we're still feeling the energy. And of course, Christmas being a solstice holiday, this is a moment honored across all cultures, all continents, and all cosmologies. It's a time when the earth itself pauses, pivots, and reminds us of balance, of cycles, and of our place within the living cosmos. Our theme today is Solstice North and South, honoring the hemispheres and using this season for collective and personal well-being. I'm honored to be joined by two extraordinary women who bring deep wisdom from different yet beautifully complementary paths. Tami Brunk is Earth Sky Woman, a shamanic astrologer and a dream teacher who helps us read the language of the stars and the land as living teachers. And Paola Palo-Mah, Paola de la Concha Zindel, is co-director of the Sound Body Xicome and a guide in sound alchemy and ancestral arts, helping us remember the body as ceremony and vibration as medicine. Together, we'll explore how the solstice is experienced differently in the North and South, what it invites us into personally and collectively, and how we can align with this moment to restore balance, intention, and our relationship. First of all, with ourselves, and then with each other, and finally with the earth and with the cosmos. If you're joining us live, we invite your reflections and questions in the comments. And for our Spanish-speaking audience, por nuestra audiencia en español, otra vez, una versión en español va a estar disponible en YouTube en 24 horas. Okay, let's begin. So first section, we're going to talk about North and South, two solstices, one Earth, okay? We're going to have about 10 minutes to talk about that. So let's start with Tami. Tami, from an astrological and Earth sky perspective, what does it mean that the North and South experience solstice in opposite ways, light and dark, expansion and inwardness?
Wow, thank you. What a good question. What comes to mind for me is that there is an opportunity to remember something that's been forgotten, which has to do with the ways that we balance each other. And so as an astrologer from primarily the Western tradition, in Western astrology, which is so widely spread, the emphasis often is on the North. And to me, it does kind of feel like it's really kind of reflects a tendency to live more from the heart up, right? So the Western consciousness and the Northern hemispheric consciousness might tend, at least at this stage, to be a little oriented more in that way. This is just and perhaps the Southern hemisphere might have, this is a very broad brushstroke, right? This is one example that there's the two poles that they're carrying. And so the South may, in some way, carry a bit more of from the heart down and the wisdoms of those lower energy centers of the body of Mother Earth. That's one thing that comes to mind. Again, very general, broad brushstroke of something that's very complex. But I'm so glad we're doing this today because it feels so vital to have Paola with us and to have those listening who perhaps have a bit more of a connection to the Southern hemisphere than the North. So I think that's what I have for this moment. You're muted.
Yes, okay. All right, thank you, Tami. Thank you very much for that. And Paola, from an ancestral and embodied perspective, How do traditions in the global south tend to hold solstice differently from dominant northern narratives?
Well, thank you. I'm currently south from you all. I'm in Puebla, Mexico, but I'm also still in North America. And so when we say global south, I tend to hear and listen to our friends in the southern hemisphere, you know, from the Andes and from the jungle and from the territories in the south. From a Mexica Toltec perspective, these times are tending to the elements, right? And specifically tending to the light as we go into the dark and in this dance of listening and in this dance of spark. I can speak from what I know, and I know that there's a lot of ceremony that goes around and not goes around, but actually is anchored with prayers that have been happening through thousands of years relating to the light and the dark. Specifically, I know of ceremony that happens and has just happened this past week, in tending to the fire and tending to the light. And people come together from different nations and literally bring their light together to tend to the hearth and listen in the spaciousness of the quiet, and also kind of setting intentions for, well, it's not kind of, it's actually setting intentions for the next cycle in community. And this is tended to during the night, right? So the fire is lit to speak to one of the traditions, because there's so many, you know, I can only speak to some of them, the ones that I've known and that I've been and attended to. But there are places where the fire is and the water is tended to during the entire night, and the water is only recently starting to emerge in some of these traditions to be placed as an accompaniment element of the fire, as the feminine to the masculine. But yeah, it's a very prayerful time, and we might think of praying in different versions of it throughout cultures. But from an indigenous, ancestral North American point of view, that's what I've experienced. And of course, in the South, right now, they're going into summer solstice. So the relation, at least from the Andean point of view, that I know a little bit about, is having to do with Taita Inti, having to do with Viracocha from at least the Andean Quero nation's point of view. But of course, there's such a diversity of indigeneity and relation to the Earth Mama and to the elements and to existence. So there must be, and there is, just a variety of traditions that relate to the deeper listening at this time. But I do think that what Tami mentions is so important, because a lot of the times when we are in the Northern Hemisphere, we tend, or at least I speak for the culture that I live in, tend to see it from that scope, or even from the United States point of view, because that's the media that we get, you know. But there's so many different transformational communications and technologies that are ancestral, that are operating and are rejuvenating and are composting and are doing a lot of things for our existence. I do think that from an ancestral point of view, the most important thing is the interconnectivity of it, and that we're not just isolated or individualized in one way or another.
Very true. There's so much truth to that, and I think it's wonderful that we take this moment to really reflect on all of that. Something that's hard to do sometimes in the midst of all the hustle and bustle of the holidays, but I really honor that both of you, as part of your traditions, are making space and time for that. So, a question for both of you: how can remembering both hemispheres at once help us to heal some of the imbalance we're living through globally?
I guess I will start. It feels like there's a big piece for many of us around. It's about the North and the South, but it's also, in a sense, almost about a severing that's happened. So whatever lives in the North or the South, what's happened is a kind of severing, it feels to me at least, between us, between those parts of ourselves, between those communities on the globe, that is just reflective of the deeper work that's happening right now. And a lot of that relational work that happens through prayer, through ceremony at these potent moments of equinoxes and solstices has to do with a reweaving or rebraiding of a connection and a relationship between the parts that have been severed from each other. So whether that's men and women, or our communities in the North or South, or the feminine and masculine principles, that this is a really beautiful time. I love what Paola is speaking to in terms of the stillness and this listening, and that it is so beautiful to understand the flowering of ceremony that's happening all across the planet right now. And so to me, there is an opportunity almost just like to feel like, I feel like the earth and our bodies, right? Like our bodies are the earth. I mean, many of us say that, understand that now. It's one of the kind of core remembrances, I think, for many of us is our land, Mother Earth. Our bodies, the earth, are the same in a sense. And so to me, it feels like almost even like a healing practice of seeing and feeling our own body, north and south. And it, again, it could be that they're switched from what I said earlier. I don't know, but that we can see even the whole earth as our body, and we can imagine like this little flowering or the little flames of fire all across the planet, and the waters, as Paola mentioned, that the feminine's coming back in. And so as these prayers, as these ceremonies are erupting all across planet Earth, as so many of us are remembering, and as those who have carried lineages and kept that fire and that prayer going for thousands of years, in many places across the planet, that as that happens, we can almost feel that in our bodies, that those north and south, above, below, all of it's getting rewoven and reknit, and kind of this song of all of that is coming together in one harmony. So maybe we can feel that happening right now in the stillness, this reweaving, reknitting of the separated parts. That's kind of how it feels right now for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds really, really good. And Paola, what comes to you?
Well, just the fact that we're even having this conversation today together is testament, and is witnessing of the beauty of interconnection of the North and South. And I really thank you, Tracy, for having us today, and you, Tami, because I feel that you truly get it, like the both of your projects really speak to the interconnectivity and the need for us to listen to each other. And for me, it's just like getting over ourselves, getting over just an individual perspective, and actually tuning into what a sister, even as simple as somebody from across the way, has to say, and because the narratives in the ethers and in our psyche and in our ancestry and our cells really are nurtured by what stories we tell each other. And so how important is it to hear a sister or a brother across the way that might have a different perspective? Well, not might, actually has a different literal perspective in the landscape, in the storytelling, and is physically in another space on Earth, on Gaia, that is tuning into, the essence of the land elsewhere. So just like when we have a rodent point of view, a tiny mouse, or we have a eagle point of view, like there's not a better point of view. They're all really needed. And so I really think that as we tune into the diversity of our capacity as humans, not only in ourselves, but through the other, then we might get over ourselves, and we might be more humble, and we might get another experience of wisdom. So I think it's vital. It's vital for for our cohesion. It's vital for our understanding. It's vital for our optimism or our awareness and authenticity to hear the other and to know that we're not always right. We're not always aligned, and that by listening to the other, we're completed. And so I think it brings compassion, it brings joy, it brings understanding, it brings accompaniment. And not everybody has access to community. We talk about community all the time being so important, but sometimes we don't have access to community in terms of like economically, socially, or even geographically or weather-wise, So I think of like single moms or like people that are snowed in or people that live far away or people that are working 7 jobs, like sometimes they don't have the time or the spaciousness to connect in community. And so how important is even just a little Zoom call or tuning into media that is not our own to understand things from a different perspective.
I think so vital what you said, Pao, and Tami as well. But as you speak about getting over ourselves, I think about us in the North and how we think all the answers are here and that we're the ones who generate and manifest things, and then we go down to the South and we take our great wisdom and we share it. And I mean, most of the people in our circles have gotten beyond that, but we still confront it, we still bump up against it daily, that people are like, oh, you mean, they might have some ideas down there that we hadn't thought about. Well, yeah. And I think it's so important for us to give ourselves the chance and the space and the time to really do what you were suggesting, what you're talking about, Paola, to just listen, to just be as a sister, as a friend, as a neighbor, and learn from our relatives, right? So I think the next section, we're going to talk a little bit about the solstice as a portal for collective well-being. And for Tami, from your perspective, what is the collective invitation of this solstice? What are we being asked to release or to remember as humanity?
It's a big question with lots of answers. And it feels to me like just to acknowledge that one of the really beautiful things that happens at the winter solstice is that we happen to live in a moment where the Earth is aligned with the galactic equator. So we have the winter solstice sun is aligned with the center of the galaxy. And that can only happen every 26,000 years. So this is something many people have talked about since 2012. And that knowledge really came from the South. It came from some of the Mayan cultures that Paola has a great deal of knowledge about or has really experienced those cultures more deeply. And so, but that alignment with the galactic center has a lot of different resonances, or there are a lot of different ways to look at that. But one of the ways is to see the souls, and many cultures have carried this understanding that the souls are birthed at the opposite end of the Milky Way galaxy, galactic edge, which is where the sun is at summer solstice. And then the souls travel then and they exit at the center of the galaxy. This is a perspective from many different societies. And so that there's a recognition. Number one, there's a recognition that we live in a pretty profound moment. And I think many humans feel that. And perhaps it's grandiose to say that. Maybe every society, every time feels like the most intense time for every community. But I think when we look at that galactic alignment and we recognize it's a part of a great, what Plato would have referred to as a great year, we understand that it is quite likely that humanity has never experienced anything quite like what we're experiencing right now. And for me, it feels like what the solstice really helps us recognize in the North specifically is how important it is to be able to become comfortable with the darkness, to be able to become more comfortable with the unknown, to be able to become more comfortable with the void, and really that feminine wisdom of that humbleness that Paola talks about, what we don't know, and to be able to come down a little bit from up above and drop down more into our bodies and the deeper wisdom. And I really love so much what Paola's saying about just making it very, very practical, because in our ceremonies and prayers, yes, we are connecting with the unseen realms, but also, of course, we have to weave into that just our daily practice of how do we care for each other. So there's all of that piece. And who is it in our community that is in the dark, or who is in our community who is not being seen, who's not visible? So what is it that in our communities and our lives that has been invisible, that has been unseen, that we're needing and wanting to look at I would say in the North, because we do tend to have such an orientation to the lightness, to the brightness, to what's conscious, what we can control. So I think in the North, the invitation to drop deeper into stillness for us as a humanity, as a collective, probably as well. I think there's that invitation for wellness. And again, like you said before, we're so busy. I think most modern people are desperate for those experiences of stillness, of rooting into the breath, of rooting into the body. And that's quite challenging for many people. But for those who, I think that invitation is part of what can create greater wellness, is to whatever degree is possible for us to take that time to still and listen and go deeper and connect to the unknown and learn to be more comfortable there.
Absolutely, Tami. I think that is key to making everything else work, right? I mean, the family time, the ceremonial time, all of it starts with a quiet center, I think. And Paola, so in times of global uncertainty like these, especially, how do ancestral practices help communities stay rooted rather than overwhelmed? Yeah, basically that.
Thank you. That's an epic question. I'm kind of relieved that Tami's been speaking first to gather and listen. These are wonderful questions. Wow, I'm tuning into that. And I think that the first moment is to ask ourselves if we know our ancestry. Because there are folks that don't. And depending on where you come from, depending on your personal story, and your blood lineage, you might have that access to the information quite practically, and sometimes it's not. And so for those people who don't have that access, I think the ancestry work and ancestral practices is just the deeper listening. And what I mean by the deeper listening is tuning into your intuition, and not only tuning in, but actually acting upon it. Because there's a lot of folks that have this listening, this relationship to their intuition, but then there's a lot of folks that don't act upon it. So I find that when you start to act upon the yearnings of the heart, or the calling of spirit in your heart and your mind, it tends to be soft. It tends to be a whisper until it has to be really loud. And if we listen to the whisper and we act upon it, if action is needed, because like Tami said, sometimes just listening is enough, right? But if there is action that is needed, that usually it's an invitation to step into our courageous nature and to step out of our comfort zone to be in more expansive awareness of who we are. And so, we say these times of uncertainty, but like, it just depends on the perspective of how long that will last. There's so many calendars, there's so many timelines, there's so many cultures that, relate to time in different ways. And so even times of uncertainty as a concept is like something that maybe we can question, is it like referencing the Kali Yuga? Is it referencing like the Mayan calendar? Is it referencing just the Western media? Because maybe this is, and sometimes we can relate to the prophecies, right? And we have this quite famous prophecy of the eagle and condor of the North and South of the Americas, at least, that a lot of you probably know, in reference to the wisdom of the condor and the eagle coming together. Is that a time of uncertainty? I don't know. These are just, phrases that sometimes are actually, being sent, or conjured. We can also conjure our own. But maybe the time of uncertainty is always because we're or never, like maybe it's always a time of certainty. So I'm just like, kind of playing with this a little bit around the language, because to visit what we say and what we share. But at least I understand what you mean in this moment, like the upheaval, the changes that are coming, that are here for them to be revealed and for us to alchemize them. So in right relation, wow, I mean, that is like something, it's profound, to be in right relation, to be in integrity, to walk in love, to be unconditional. Like these are things that are life tasks. And realistically, at least what I'm working on is being honest when I haven't been in alignment, being honest when I haven't been in integrity, being humble about me stumbling. And that has been like really helpful. And I haven't always been able to do that. And it's hard for me to admit when I've been wrong. And just the simple practicality of that, of like opening and saying to a neighbor, a brother, a sister, a friend, like, actually, I'm sorry. I was not able to walk in integrity in this way at this time, has been like very moving and alchemizing for me, because it's showing like the bits that we don't want to be, or we don't want to be seen as, right? And just that has been really transformative. And it sounds so simple, but it's actually allowing for me to be more authentic in who I am, that is flawed. And so, and it's also flawless at the same time, that this paradigm of language and the perfection and imperfection of who we are. So I'm just feeling like, on an ancestral level, just to strive for honesty with ourselves and others is a big deal. And it's being a big deal for me, because it's bringing me back into connection with the other.
Yeah, I think that that humility to be able to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers, that we do make mistakes, and that we have in fact made many, can be really, really heart opening, and can be a bridge to deeper and more authentic relationships, right? So Tami, I wanted to give you a chance to answer that one. What does living in right relation actually look like right now? Not ideally, but realistically.
Yeah, I was just, when Paola was talking, I got so many chills when you were talking about the listening and then about the acting, the taking action. And so, there was just so much there. Like what I find often as an astrologer is that it's so easy to go into the abstract. And it is very easy in this moment where so many people are paying attention to what's happening and self-soothing. We self-soothe sometimes by the paradigms that are really all over the place right now, which do tap into prophecy, which do tap into so many things. But yeah, what does it look like right now? I can speak for myself that two things. This morning, I finally reset up my ancestor altar. And for me, that's so important on the level that I was able again to just connect and be still and just light some candles. And really, it was the same except to the ancestors that I was just saying, I'm sorry. I feel the places where I've been really out of alignment and I haven't been listening. And I wake up in the middle of the night and I feel those places. And sometimes it has had to get really loud. And there are some things in my life right now that feel very loud. And of course, it's not just speaking to the ancestors, what you keep bringing in, Paola, which is very important, especially for those who are in the spiritual fields, is that it does need to translate into our relationships with other humans, of course. And so the way that that's looked for me is even, I'll be really transparent. You know, Tracy and I had a difficult conversation last night. We're sisters, and it has to do with patterns for me of just it's very difficult to, I have certain patterns around intimacy and separation from people and just maintaining bonds that's been long lasting my whole life. And so listening to those, you know, not getting defensive, trying to really listen, which I did at first, trying to really sit with that. I think many of us are trying to learn how to be more humble, but also differentiate between authentic humility and sometimes being on our knees, that experience of being on our knees, trying to stay awake in that way more often so that we forget and we remember again sooner. That feels important, but separating it from this kind of false humility, because there's also so much suppression and oppression that so many of us have been enculturated into, especially I think as women, and people pleasing and not being rooted in our center and in true sources of power, which are connection to the earth and to each other and collective power. It can be, I think, what many are, and I'll say this astrologically, there's so much happening between the sign of Aries and Pisces, and a back and forth between the remembering of unity consciousness, the healing of the patriarchal paradigm that we're all separated, that we've got to be in competition, you know, all of these things. There's, with all of the Pisces energies we've been steeped in, it's like dissolving that. So many of us have been remembering how connected we are to everything. And that can look like grief around what's happening in Sudan or Gaza or to our oceans, or so I feel it as a melting, dissolving, like we're feeling more sensitive to our connectedness. And at the same time, there's this Aries spark and fire that I think has more to do with the courage piece that you're talking about, Paola, of in the challenging of the, is it a time of uncertainty, or is it a time to actually finally step forward in the ways we've been called for so long that we've been terrified to step forward? Because probably for most of us, we have been getting the call for a long time and we've been avoiding it. I'll say I've been avoiding some of the more difficult commitments I would need to make. So I think for me, the question is, how do we help each other to be more courageous? What is needed in terms of the systems of support from the ancestral realms, from the communities we're part of? How can we help each other remember and become stronger so we can be courageous and do what needs to be done?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tami. And I think, being sisters, biological sisters with you has given me a sort of on the one hand, a mirror, but also a framework to be able to work within, to improve myself as a human being and just deepen as a human being. And it's just been such a blessing. And I just really thank you for your courage and your integrity and all the teachings. So. But we have a little less than 20 minutes now. Actually, we could go a little bit over if we need to. because there is not a program after us. We usually do have one, so that's nice to have the flexibility. But the next section, we're going to talk about personal practices for this season. So let's go for about 10 minutes on that one. And this question is for both of you. If someone is feeling exhausted, disoriented, or emotionally tender right now, what is one gentle solstice practice you would recommend to reconnect?
I can go. I think it depends on which part of the world you are, but if you're entering winter solstice, you know, just it feels very simple to say self-care, of course, but I think nourishment is a big part of this time. Food is a big part of this time. And whereas if you're going to the summer solstice, it might be the opposite. You know, it might be a more lighter version of nourishment in other ways with the sun or with nature. Like for me, being in the northern hemisphere, the food bit is actually an ancestral practice, and it's depending on, of course, what nourishing foods we're doing. But these are the times that the grandmothers are like getting everything together. There's so many women that connect through food, and they're preparing. The reality is that they're preparing these feasts, and everybody's preparing these feasts for one another to nourish ourselves. And so I think that it's just important to be honest about what we need, you know, because there's even a tendency to say like rest and don't do anything, like slow down. But this, you know, this might be a time where you gain clarity and you have finally the spaciousness to go and exercise, and that feels good for you. You know, it just, for me, it's a gentle solstice practice is to just tune into what you need. And I think that the slowness of the recipe is important, because when we, in terms of speaking to food and nourishment, you know, if we have the spaciousness now to actually cook something that is slow cooked. So not like slapping a sandwich on, not a microwave thing, not a pasta even. It's like, because these are things that maybe you eat when you have little time to do things. Whereas now the invitation is to, like, you know, go to the market or go to the supermarket, invest time in reading what your grandmother wrote, not online, but in an old notebook or in a tiny book. Look up the handwriting, you know, of that recipe, or maybe investigate an online recipe of something that you might intuitively feel is from your ancestry, and make the time to make the cookie or make the time to make the, you know, the casserole or the latke or whatever it is that you're tuning into in your ancestry, right? I'm actually today going to do that. And it feels very ancestral to me, because even though I'm by myself right now at home, it feels nourishing to me to connect to tradition of what we're creating with our food, which is our ancestral language, or one of the many ancestral languages. And I have a dear friend, Omar, who said, if you want to connect to your ancestors, like, either speak the language or the songs, farm, or make the foods. And so those, I really like those ideas and that wisdom of Omar. And I think that it's important to just let the judgment around whatever it is that we have around our relationship to food, and also being mindful, of course. You know, it's not like we're just gonna, you know, not be mindful of how we're ingesting what we're choosing. But I do think that there's a lot of love. You know, I don't know if you're familiar with Hildegard von Bingen, but she is a beautiful mystic from Germany who had these magical cookie recipes. She would explain like what cinnamon does in terms of joy, you know, and like the spiritual practice of ingesting cinnamon. and things like that I find fascinating. And so each of us in our ancestries, whether that be European, African, Asian, American, we have these recipes, and to go deeper in what it means to make them, I find it really beautiful.
Thank you, Paola. And I'm reflecting on how sometimes my sisters and I get a little irritated with how food just consumes existence at the house of my mother. It's growing it, cultivating it, preparing it, storing it, cooking the next meal, cleaning up from the meal, cooking the next meal, planning the next meal. It's just, it feels like all of it too much. But listening to you, I'm realizing this has so many dimensions. It's really about so much more than the food, right? It, in some ways, we are reenacting the work and the lives of our grandmothers and our ancestors in a good way. So thank you for that reminder. And Tami, what would you like to say about it? A practice that can help us bring us back into ourselves, help ground us, help nourish us in these times when things are just so hectic and crazy or emotionally taxing.
I, again, just so love what Paola brings in here around the way that we can say things like slow down, do those things, but it's so different for each of us. So I would just want to echo that sense of the listening is, from my perspective, it really is to take that time to see what we want and need. So I've definitely been feeling that more. It feels to me like winter solstice, it's like this river underground that's just a deep, deep, potent, palpable stillness. And so the way I see it and feel it is like the earth is pulling us down into her. And so for me, sometimes it will be to go out. I like to go out around noon and feel the sun's light just streaming into my body. But I like to go barefoot, even if it's cold. That to me is a nice challenge. And I just, because I'm feeling really connected. It's not very long, but I will do that. And then just really feeling my roots go down like I'm a big tree. I think practicing feeling myself as this big oak tree connects me to my ancestors, and it helps me to understand what the energy of this time of year can be. It's rooting so deep in. And so my sense is that it doesn't even need to take that long, but if we take the time to still in whatever way we want, meditation, being out under the sun and letting the light of the sun come in, chanting, whatever, or as Paola is saying, I think slowing down when we're peeling the potatoes, or like Tracy said, we have family traditions that often it's kind of like, oh, we're doing this the same way every time. Can we do it differently? Maybe the differently is to drop in to what we're actually doing and research it more, as you're saying, with that wonderful. Now I want to read that. I just saw that book, one of those books by Hildegard von Bingen. So I think that's a wonderful idea from our German ancestry, because I think many people from German ancestry, where we live, it's most people, it can be challenging to find a route down into the ancestral wisdom that is feminine oriented. And I love that you give Hildegard as one of many clues or one of many pathways. But yeah, for me, it's that. Also, I think making land offerings. The way I like to do that is like my ancestors did. I have we have these windows that are like have stone shelves butting out from them outside, all around the windows of the place where I live. And every morning I like to put sunflower seeds out for the birds. I've done that since I was a little girl. My grandpa, my grandma did it. And so making offerings to the land, specifically to the birds, that helps me feel connected to the magic of the season. But again, just going back to, I don't think it has to take a lot of time, but for busy, busy people, I just want to say, if you can just give yourself a little time, and for me, it really is sitting just for a moment and just letting the earth pull me down into her. And so I can tap, even if it's for a moment, into that that very potent, deep stillness. It doesn't take a lot, but we just have to drop in for a minute. So any practice that helps us go there, I think, is deeply nourishing to the body and to the soul.
Tami, can I add something to that?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for what you're sharing. It's really like helping me in my cells. I'm feeling very nourished by what you're sharing. And, you know, there's also this element of the holidays having to be hectic that I'm actually also questioning, because if we're hectic, it's because of our decisions. And yeah, we're not victim to our decisions. We can decide how we spend our time and how and whom we spend it with. And so I think that's important to consider, that in terms of the people pleasing bit that you mentioned before, like I'm not hectic at all right now. I'm very chill. And of course, I don't have children. So I do think that the element of children around the holidays it adds a huge hectic element to it. But in terms of our adult relations, but even with our children, how can we like express, how can we share the calmness of winter if we're in the Northern Hemisphere with them? How can we express what's actually happening outside to them? Because we are the creators of our decision making. And so life will extend invitations and we can say no. We can say yes. We can choose how we engage. We can choose to create the really difficult recipe that involves like 10,000 ingredients that I have to go across town, or we can create a simple recipe with the things that we have with love. We can plan. We can do home gifts. You know, there's just a variety of decision making that we are sovereign beings that we can choose from. So I think it's a huge ass deal to like acknowledge that we are creating our reality and that we're not victims of what happens around the holidays. Like if there is a reunion that we don't want to go to, we can choose not to go to it. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, how do we relate to our own decision making in this time will create a hectic sense or not.
Yeah, that's so true, so true. I always get hung up in the whole gift giving thing because I'm the eldest sister. Maybe that's why, but I always have to come back from Mexico with a whole suitcase full of gifts, and we have 50 plus grandchildren in our family. So then there's all the stress around what they're gonna, if, you know, they're gonna like it. How about the ones who didn't get anything? How do we, you know? And it's all really. One day, my mom said to me, Tracy, we don't need your presents. We need your presence. Stop being off in that room wrapping the presents for hours. We want you here with us. So I haven't quite integrated that lesson yet, but I think what you're saying is very important. We don't have to be victims of our decisions. We can decide.
Yeah, Tracy, and even I'm just gonna like go in there and be like, and you can decide to get things online. You can decide and not travel with a huge, and you can decide to get them earlier. You can decide to gift an experience. You can decide to do a craft. There's like so many versions of how we can create so that we're not a victim of our decisions.
Mm-hmm. It's all true. And we can also just make our present be our presence sometimes. Yeah. So
I'm going to add one brief thing.
I'm sorry, what can
Because
you?
this is so rich and real right now. Just one brief, just a word. To me, it felt like, because my birthday is right there too, I could have done a million things, and I love we get to make the choices. I chose spaciousness. And to me, that's a word for the season as well. We can choose spaciousness, simplicity. And I mean, to me, that's worth a lot, a whole lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm seeing that we have, typically we would need to close right now, but we can take a little bit more time today because I want to take a moment to acknowledge our wonderful producer, Karina, who has been providing all these incredible images. And wow, she just gave us the gift of 15 to 20 minutes more if we want that. So let's just take our time with the next section of questions. I was thinking we might have to skip it, but the next section was going to be about bridging the hemispheres, integration. And so let's take 5 to 7 minutes for that. So this question is for both of you. If we imagine the North and South in dialogue rather than opposition, and I think this is very important for right now with what we're hearing coming from the United States administration regarding Venezuela, just sending out waves of love to Venezuela right now. If the North and South were in dialogue rather than opposition, what wisdom emerges for the year ahead? What would you like people, to think in terms of that?
I bet we have a lot both to say. First, I think I would like to say that it might be important to even, and Paula, you remind me of this too so much, being aware of our words and how we're presenting this, because if we immediately say that they're in opposition, then maybe we're only focusing on the surface. And I don't mean that the surface doesn't have very real lived consequences, but is it possible that there's already dialogue happening that we're going to be deepening into, that's already beginning, that's already part of the prophecy we're living into? And so then I would just propose that, and then to look for where it's happening already, like what we're doing and what's happening in other areas. I would just presence that first to say that maybe it's already underway and we get to be part of that current.
Absolutely. I think more than maybe, I think it is.
Yeah. And so, but that's, for me, it feels like it actually starts. I think that practically it does have to do with reaching out, if for those listening in the US, for example, making conscious choices this year to get outside of our comfort zone, because we still thankfully do have many neighbors, community members who are from the South, and making an effort to be in dialogue and relationship with and in active allyship with them. I think it really does have to do with that. And then we live in a moment where we can connect through these mediums with individuals who are in the global South, or even in North America, in the South, where we can engage with communities that we have connections with in various ways, and just choose to, we talk about listening, choose to be listening to what the impact of the policies of our government are. And we could do all of that, and I think to start though where we are is a good idea, and that's a really good place to start.
Absolutely. And Paola?
Yeah, thank you, Tami, for that. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that something that I would invite is for us to consider, and I speak to myself as well, of course, like to consider that global politics is just one of the lenses of how we relate to the world in the North and South, and it's not necessarily accurate of existence, and I would dare to say that it isn't. But I was in a gathering, actually, I think where you and I were together, Tracy, in Bacalar so many years ago. And I remember going to one of the Mayan elders' talk. And how long ago was Bacalar? That was like...
That was 2017. Yeah, that was 8 years ago.
Okay, so 8 years ago. I remember being at an elders' talk with some of the Mayan elders, and they said to us at that time, you know what, like this circus, this political circus is going to continue. And they urged us to just focus on our own projects and to not pay attention. And that wasn't an invitation out of a lack of empathy. It was just an instruction for us to place our focus and our energy on what we're creating for this world, what we are bridging for this world. And so I think it's a big deal for the North, and specifically Turtle Island and United States, an invitation to detach a little bit from the only political sphere and version of things, because actually there's a multiplicity of existence that is occurring outside of that, and that I think needs to be heard and needs to be treasured, needs to be cherished, nurtured, and built upon. And so I think that I agree with Tami. This has already been occurring for some time now, that we are in communication. And so I feel like nourishing the seed, like just like any relation, right? Like any friendship or plant that we might have, if we relate to it and we water it, we take care of the relation from north to south, whether that be through visits, where that be like uplifting my friend's work, whether that be like just sharing, even just sharing this link, with others, is an example of the seedlings that are, that are being shared, that the harvest of all of us, of the voices that come together. Because I do believe that in times of transition, or any time in general, if, grief process is, of course, very important. And once we start to feel like ourselves after grief process, then if we can tend to that inspiration, and if we can hold and uplift the inspiration within one another, like how important would it be if, as friends and as communities of the North and South, we can encourage each other to continue to give our gifts? How potent is that? If like my friend, or if my colleague, or if my mother, or whomever I am relating to from the North and South, how potent would that encouragement be in times of need? So yeah, I'm focusing on that, on encouragement of each other and accompaniment of each other when grief processes are occurring as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Pao. I think that could be the greatest gift of all, really. That is so, so important during these times and during all times. I remember very well that incredible gathering that we had with the Vision Council, and thank you for reminding us of it, because Vision Council is going to be a part of the conversation this coming year, if all goes well as we think, because I think we're going to have another one, and this is something very special, because it takes a lot to put one together, and it doesn't happen every year. It doesn't even necessarily happen every 5 years. So we're going to be looking forward to learning more about that. I am hearing a little bit, from our director, Gerardo Said. And he is in a ritual, he is in a sunrise ritual in Cuernavaca, Meditación por la Paz Mundial, Xicome, I can't read it because it's too small. Yeah, but with harmony on the earth. And for more information, I'm going to share this with Car, and perhaps she can put this online for us, if I can. Meantime, while I'm working on that, let's see.
Can I respond a little to what Paola said, because it was so rich and juicy?
Please, by all means. Yes.
Oh, that was articulated with so much. I just resonate so much with what you had said, Paola. And I think it is true that here in the North, people do tend to get plugged into one layer. And it's very unfortunate, because it diminishes and it dehumanizes us. And so for us to, and the word inspiration, when you said inspiration, I feel like that's also part of what the stillness and the bubbling up of winter solstice is, the earth pulling us in and feeling that beautiful light. There's something about the light with the sun in the south that's just like this inspiration can come in and our visions can come in. And I actually think we need to protect them from all of that noise. I think we need to guard them with teeth, like guard them with each other. No, I won't let that be the reality, the totality of reality. No, not that. We have something else we came for. And so I just really appreciate what you're saying, Paula, and 100%. And that there we have things to do. And how can we light up that spark inside of us and strengthen that within each other? I think that's really vital. So just wanted to just acknowledge what you said and just add a little more.
Just realized my mic was muted. Yes, thank you so much. That's we tend to get so involved and so tied up. Speaking for myself as a journalist and as an activist with what's happening in the political sphere, but that's such a small part of what's happening. Let's see. I think it's about time to move to our closing question. I had asked Car if she could show the video of the ceremony of Gerardo, but we're not seeing that. So I guess for a final question before our closing, what would both of you like people to carry with them after this solstice? Not as a goal, but as a feeling or an orientation.
For me, it's, I personally have gone through so much in the past years, and I feel like as a collective, we have gone through a lot. And for me, it's, I think, just like the notion of acceptance, and that actually things will turn out how they have to turn out, and that might not be the way we want it to turn out, or it may be. This notion of uncertainty is something that for me is like a muscle and a practice. But what's brought me great comfort in times of upheaval, times of change, is just acceptance. Like, just, we can plan, we can conjure, we can pray, we can act, we can listen, we can cry, we can be overjoyed. But it's just like the piece of relating to whatever is going on from a more serene point of view is what has, allowed me to live a more authentic life. And so I think it's just the peace element, like for me, the solstice is about returning to oneself and listening to the earth. And so, yeah, I speak about this deeper listening as a part of my vocabulary, as a constant part of my vocabulary, because that's what has helped me along this lifetime and other lifetimes. And so, whether it be solstice or not, just the deeper listening of ourselves connected to acceptance and peace is what I'm striving to cultivate.
Thank you so much, Paula. And Tam.
There's so much that I've been just as you're speaking and feeling into that feels like it's about, for me, it's like a soul. It has to do with the soul presence. And so I think about how this is a special solstice also on the level that we have Mars and Venus very close to the sun on the other side of the sun. And so to me, there's this, we're talking north and south, we're talking about what does it take for the parts of us that maybe have been not completely harmonized, what would it take for them to begin to have a conversation, to deepen the conversation or come into a more coherence, more harmony. That's kind of what I feel in a general sense in my body as a desire. But I often think of that with the Venus cycle. I think of Inanna, the goddess who represents Venus, in the Sumerian, the root cultures beneath the Abrahamic religions that came before. I think when she's on the other side of the sun, it represents the part of us that has been moving through, like going deeper, 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 our soul or our spirit going deeper, deeper into the body, into the physical. And so it feels like a process of ensoulment, more soul in our body, more presence in our body, more presence with the moment. To me, that's what it feels like. It's a deep, deep joy. And I don't mean joy like always happy. It can be joy almost like, I don't know if that's the word. It's presence. And so it can be tears one moment. It can be silence the next moment. It can be really feeling the love of an individual in our lives. It's just, I think it's soul presence. That's what I feel in this time of year.
Yes, very much. That is the invitation. And speaking of invitations, we now have the video of our director, Gerardo Said, downloaded in the studio of CAR. And it's a 3-minute little video that we're going to share right now to kind of show what's happening in another little part of the world with Solstice. And this will be in Spanish. So those of you who don't understand Spanish, we're just going to ask your forbearance and to really just let the beauty of it wash over you. Thank you. Car, estamos listos.
Agua, mi sangre, aire, mi aliento y fuego, mi espíritu. Tierra, mi cuerpo, agua, mi sangre, aire, mi aliento y fuego, mi espíritu. Tierra, mi cuerpo, agua, mi sangre, aire, mi aliento y fuego, mi espíritu. Tierra, mi cuerpo, agua, mi sangre, aire, mi aliento y fuego, mi espíritu. Tierra, mi cuerpo, agua, mi sangre.
Thank you for that, Car, and thank you, Gerardo, if you're watching. I did not know what to expect with that. I do know that Gerardo was at the solstice ceremony in Cuicuilco, which is a very sacred site in Mexico City. Goes back many, many hundreds and thousands of years. Paola could tell us more about that maybe the next time, but I think it's time for us to begin to close. And so I'm going to just take a moment to remind the viewers that we're going to have subtitled versions of this available in Spanish in 24 hours. It will be available on YouTube immediately after we finish and on Facebook to be able to share with all of our friends. And then on Friday, it will be available on Spotify. And also, just to let you know, Gerardo has been really happy to see that we've had very good attendance or sharing of our videos, viewing of our videos, never fewer than 400. It's been really, this will be very watched and appreciated. So I guess whoever would like to begin first, I'd just like to ask some closing words from each of you. Okay.
You can go. Just, thank you so much, Tracy, for inviting me to be here with you. It's been a pleasure and honor to be friends and to continue to cultivate this relation. And I feel like this project is so important and so beautiful and so encouraging to me and to communities from the North and South and beyond. So thank you so much, Tracy. Gracias, Tami, for your lovely presence and sisterhood and sacred word that's always, so wise and on point. Gracias, Car, and gracias, Gerardo.
So Tami, would you like to say some closing words?
Yes, I just also want to just appreciate this community and this moment and you, Tracy, for bringing us together, and for Ka, and for Geraldo, and for these beautiful ceremonies that are happening. I love that we're ending with that remembrance that we are all doing this together and just remembering and focusing our attention on all of those beautiful communities coming together with their prayers and their open hearts. And so feeling very grateful for all of you who are doing that good work. And again, for this offering, and for you, Paola, and the work that you do in the world, and the way I actually was feeling that what struck me today the most, the words were "get over yourself." To me, I don't mean to just be a mirror and echo, but to me, that really struck home. So I think what I feel with that was those words that were most impactful today is, on the one hand, it's a humbling, and on the other hand, it's a reminder, maybe it's not supposed to be so heavy. Maybe when we do this together, it gets to be lighter. Maybe that's, and so just, yeah, I just appreciate the humor with that. And so I just offer gratitude for the beauty and the humor and the realness, the authenticity that you bring, Paola, and just all the good hard work that goes into this offering into the world, to the team, and Tracy, for all the ways you give yourself. So thank you. Gracias. Gracias a todos.
Well, I would just echo that thought of gracias to Car and to Gerardo for creating this wonderful space and sharing it with us. For all the collaborators of the Esperanza Project, which is my primary affiliation here. And just to remind everyone that you can watch this and a whole lot of other amazing programming at Mundo Holistiko TV on YouTube, also on their Facebook page, Mundo Holistiko. That's HOLISTKO with a K. There's another Mundo Holistiko with a C that's not us. So, and then on Fridays, if you really want to just practice your Spanish, and I really encourage that, to tune into our Spotify podcast. So once again, thank you so much to Tami and to Paola for your presence, for your beautiful sharings and your reflections. It's just been beautiful for me. It's been very, very special. Thank you. And a very happy solstice, a very happy Christmas, and we'll be seeing you soon. Bye-bye.